Well, hey kiddies, Retro Dad. I see all these discussions lately and all these videos about retro collecting is dead. What's my take on it? Let's discuss that after these messages. I hear it time and time again, the NES is expensive. We talked about it before on our channel, but so is the Super Nintendo and so is the Sega Genesis. Heck, even the Game Boy is much more now than it was a couple years ago. I've seen a couple games, I'm surprised how much they are now. One game I do not have in my collection for the NES is Swamp Thing. I could have got it for $60 a while back, and I said, no, I'll wait. Well, now it's over $100, and it's a weird game to be worth that much when it's widely known as a terrible game. And that's one reason why a lot of people are saying, they don't hate collecting for the NES, or they hate collecting for retro games because of the prices. Do all these prices mean retro collecting is dead? No, I don't think it's dead yet. I think eventually it will, though. I think eventually it will trickle down and then finally die off. There'll always be a few hardcore collectors and a few players who want to get the real deal. Prices do not equal death, though, in this hobby. But I think it can discourage people from getting too far into it and spending too much money. Well, kiddies, I've been doing this show practically for 5 years plus, and I've been collecting much longer than that. But I also consider myself a retro game player. I prefer playing over collecting. And even my own viewpoint on collecting has changed tremendously over the last couple years. In fact, check this out. This was done a couple months ago. I was going to release it, but I decided not to, but I'm going to release it right now. It's about me discussing the N64. I'm at a point in my collection where I'm thinking about possibly paring down stuff. I'm talking about getting rid of the systems that I really don't care for. So one system I'm thinking about possibly cutting from my collection is the N64. Even Donkey Kong 64 and Doom 64, which I was super excited to get, when I was playing, I found myself feeling unimpressed. I've never been a fan of the N64, even though there's plenty of games on there I love to play. Rampage, World Tour, for example, StarCraft 64, Mario 64, Mario Kart 64. The wrestling games on it are absolute classics. That'd be the one reason that I'd want to hold on to the system. But I find myself running out of room. I do not live in a house, I live in an apartment, and my collection for the NES and other retro systems had priority over the N64. This used to be where my N64 stuff was, and I no longer have that, so I did get rid of it. And I had a decent little play library. Not a collection, because I didn't have even 20 games for it. I had almost. And I did have an N64 with an expansion pack. But it was my least favorite Nintendo system, so I felt it had to go. I've been cutting down my PS1, PlayStation 2, Xbox Original, and like I said earlier, the N64. And I even got rid of my Game Gear a while back. Another system I'm thinking about possibly cutting is the Game Gear. It's another handheld system that I played several times when I was a kid. Did not own one until a couple years ago. And I used to avoid the Game Gear like a plague. And I started picking them up because they were really cheap. And I find them all the time, but I usually walk away from them still. And getting rid of the Game Gear has saved me a lot of money, because I always see Game Gear games for cheap. Like, I could buy that. No, I don't need it, because I don't have a Game Gear. But games are expensive. One thing I'll talk about in my Game Boy video, I've realized that the Game Boy game prices have jumped in the last 3 years. I don't really follow the Game Boy prices as much as I do for the NES. There's still a lot of cheap Game Boy games 10 and under, but a lot of them are 20 and up. And that adds a lot when there's over 500 games. I have noticed that there's a mindset change going on with a lot of collectors. Some of them feel, why spend the money, spend the effort of trying to get the games? Instead, get something easier like a emulator or Raspberry Pi. We've discussed that many times on this channel. And that seems to be the case. I've noticed some collectors are unloading their stuff and they're getting alternatives. They're finding a cheaper way. Resellers and sellers generally have been trying to unload their merchandise, and you'll see their prices get cut after a week because no one's buying. Eventually, we're going to run into a dead end where people are not going to be buying these games, and all of the sellers and collectors who want to unload the collections or merchandise or surplus are going to have to unload them for a lot less than when they first acquired them. And I think we're heading towards there in a couple years. I think with the exception of some consoles, I think they'll retain their value. I have noticed the same thing at stores. When I go in there, there's a set of really great NES games that have been there for a long time. In fact, even myself, I'm having a hard time getting rid of duplicates that I have, including Young Indiana Jones. Technically, this is my second copy, and I've tried to unload this for really cheap. No one's buying, and this is an uncommon game. I've let this try to go for cheap. I just cannot get rid of it. I think someone's finally picking it up today, though. Maybe it's the fact we're just in a different season and it's summer. People don't want to spend as much money on gaming. They want to, retro gaming, I mean. They want to go out there and spend more money in the summer or family vacations. But there is a change coming, and I don't think it's dead, but I do think it's changing and it's evolving. And I do see more people are getting into it, but they're quickly leaving. And us old dinosaurs have been collecting for a long time. I've been collecting since 95 plus, are starting to change their minds and get out of it a little bit. So that's my take on it. I'll discuss it more in another video down the line. But thank you so much for watching. Have fun. Go game. See you later. But I think there's going to be an exodus. I think some people are going to be leaving this hobby permanently or leaving it for a while and coming back to it. I've heard a couple buyers out there who unloaded their collections 5 years ago. They're trying to get some of their games they used to have, and now they are regretting it because it's really expensive to get the games now than it was 5, 6, 7 years ago. And that's what they're facing. But I don't think it's dead yet.